On Christmas Day, 1991, NBC aired an episode of Later with Bob Costas with singer John Mellencamp. The interview's really good, and Mellencamp, of course, smokes through the whole thing. But for me, it'll always remain a special interview. Not because of the content, but because of what happened when I posted it about a year and a half ago, without an introduction. You know, as you probably gathered from the channel, all the reshared existing content, i.e. television broadcasts, I had to pull them down and add introductions and all that stuff to comply with the YouTube rules. So anyhow, when this was up originally, I got contacted by Bob Costas, and he thanked me for preserving his legacy. You see, most of the episodes of Later perished in the Universal Warehouse fire. The only ones that really exist in the official vault are the episodes that were licensed out to CNBC, and they were mostly political talking heads and newscasters and authors and stuff, not the musicians and actors that are just so much more fun on Later with Bob Costas. Costas found out about my channel from John Mellencamp, who had seen... No, I take that back. He found out about the channel from Richard Lewis, but Mellencamp contacted him and thanked him after watching my upload for what the singer deemed as the best interview of his career. Costas reported that he had not spoken with Mr. Mellencamp since the interview and broadcast, so kind of cool. People that were interviewed are happy to see him. The people that did the interviewing and made the show are happy they exist. So there is purpose for resharing existing content, as long as you put it in a humorous or historical perspective kind of way, you know. So thank you, Bob. Merry Christmas. Thanks for all the great interviews. I really think you're the best, and many of the people who comment on the channel agree. I wish Later was not a late program. It was still going on.
Merry Christmas, everybody, and yes, this is John Mellencamp, and that was John Mellencamp on I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus with your little girl, right?
Yeah, she's not so little anymore. She's 10 years old, and that was done in 1987, I think, at a sound check in Indianapolis, Indiana.
At that point, 1987, I guess you're John Cougar Mellencamp. You're not Johnny Cougar anymore.
Right.
But there's an interesting story there, because what you put across in your music, in the way you carry yourself, and everything I've read about you is you don't want to be one of these slick, packaged guys. You know, you want to deliver something that has some meaning to you and get it across directly to your audience. And yet, starting out, you were packaged.
Yeah, and I think when you learn a lesson like that so early on, I was 22 years old. I'm in New York, you know, for the first time in my life, and I have a record deal.
What they gave me like $8,000 and said, go make a demo tape. So I'd never been in a studio before, so I went and recorded everybody else's songs, right? And I took them in there, and it came out an album, and I mean, it was gonna. They said, come and listen to it, and this is gonna be your album. And I went, well, all right. I went to look at the album cover, didn't have my real name on it. My real name's not John Cougar, it's John Mellencamp. And I said, who's this fool? You know? What's this Johnny Cougar business? You know, that's not me. And he says, look, I made up the name David Bowie, and it'll work for Bowie, and it'll work for you. And I'm some dumb kid, and I go, okay.
At that point, I would have done anything. I would have signed a hamburger to have a record deal.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And that's pretty much what it came down to. So after I kind of stuck my head up and looked around and realized that, you know, this isn't really what I want to do, it was almost too late. So it's taken me, what, 17 years just to get my name back. And to me, it's just something that happens. But to other people, I guess they either think it's funny or silly or interesting or whatever they may think. I have no control over that. But it was, you know, pop commodities are just something that I just never wanted to be. I wrote a song about it called Pop Singer.
Yeah, which some people don't really understand, right?
Well, a lot of people took it, you know, on a very surfacey level. They didn't really listen or something to what was being said in the song, and they thought that I was putting down what I had done for the last 10 years. And of course, that's not true. I love music, you know. I love making records, but I don't love the commercialization of rock and roll, and I don't like the selling out of rock and roll. I don't want to be a pop singer.
It's almost inevitable that popular songs, past and present, are used in connection with commercial enterprises now. You've done everything you can to try and keep yourself from getting into that, right?
I've done everything but take money. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I've been asked by numerous corporations to put my material with their product, but the song never was written for that. None of the songs are ever written for that. I mean, I've said it before, but, you know, when John Lennon wrote Revolution, that meant something to me as a teenager, as a young man. It meant something to a generation.
Yeah.
Now, as adults having kids, my kids hear that song on a TV commercial, and it cheapens my past to those kids, because to them it's just, oh, it's a TV commercial. I thought that song was important when you were a kid.
What was that Neil Young video about a year ago? Ain't singing for Miller.
Yeah, that's great.
Ain't singing for Bud.
Neil is, you know, I admire Neil, and if I have, there's very few role models for John Mellencamp. So if I have, he would be part of a role model for me. Wonderful songwriter. Always reinventing himself. He's a great, you know, he's a great performer.
When you were growing up in Indiana, who got to you first? Not in your personal life, but musically, coming over the radio, who got to you?
Well, I was lucky, you know, I grew up and there was a radio station that FM is just starting. You remember when that just happened. And as a young guy, I could pick up Chicago radio, right, and Detroit radio in Indiana.
WLS out of Chicago?
Yeah.
Guys like Johnny Lujack?
Yeah, did you hear that stuff?
Yeah.
And that was great, you know. I would go to bed at night listening to that music, and radio was so wonderful back then. I mean, you could hear Sam and Dave, and then you would hear, you know, Jimi Hendrix. And then you would hear Bob Dylan. Then you'd hear Johnny Cash. I mean, the playlist back then on those stations was just, it was this very special moment in time for radio and for rock and roll, and for young guys like us at the time.
A while back, you made your band, before you went out on tour, learn like 160 songs.
Right.
And some of them weren't songs that people who get pretentious about rock and roll would necessarily put on their list of classics. Some of them were garage rock things, but you liked the energy and the grit that they had, right?
Well, it's funny, you know, it's like anything else. How do you build a house? You know, I mean, well, you and I could go out and we could do what we think is correct. But what that exercise was all about was finding out the truth. Because back then you would have a jazz drummer with a blues bass player and a rock guitar player and a gospel singer. So you have all these different energies going into one thing. So you and I could, you know, or put together a little band and we could play Louie Louie, right? But let's look at it. How was it really done? And that's what we did. We would take old songs and we would look at what the bass player was really doing. Not what, you know, we could play the root and the fifth and, you know, get through the songs, but figuring out the correct part, what was really on that record. And all of the musicians did that. So what you ended up with was learning that, well, it wasn't as simple as we thought it was. There's some very interesting, crazy little parts that made these songs have so much personality, which is why I still love them and you still love them, and maybe not love some of the music today as much because it's more correct. The music today is more mathematically correct. The beats are boom, boom. You know, we got metronomes and drum machines and everything so that we're not human. Those records were so human. You know, it was a bunch of people trying to figure out what is rock and roll. There was no rules, no boundaries, no playlist, no guidelines. It was real.
And you know, a lot of it that maybe isn't considered by some to be art, and maybe doesn't rise to the lasting level of creativity, isn't a landmark like the Beatles stuff or the Rolling Stones stuff or Hendrix or Dylan or whatever. But some of that stuff, I don't care whether it seems hip to say it or not, She'd Rather Be With Me by the Turtles is a great song, when you're driving down the road.
It's a great song.
Money Money by Tommy James is a great song. If I'm at my driveway and Money Money comes on, I go around the block.
Yeah, listen to it. Yeah, because it was a great song, and a lot of that is the key word, song. Songs seem to have taken a back seat lately in the rock business. The groove is more important than the song, it appears to me right now. But they had great songs, and maybe a band like the Box Tops only had 2 great songs, but they had those 2 great songs, and they'll, you know, they'll live forever, at least with me.
When you were a kid, the first time you heard the letter, didn't you think the Box Tops were black?
Absolutely. Well, I can't tell you what, I thought all bands were black back then. I thought every band was black back then, you know. I didn't know. And it was good because, you know, it was left so much to our imagination because we never saw these guys. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There wasn't a television for us to look at that had rock music on it. And the song was like left to our imagination. The guys playing the songs were in our imagination. And it was just really a two-man sport. You had your radio and the music, or your stereo, one man, and the other person was you. You really participated in the music. Now it's kind of like, okay, entertain me. I ain't like that one. Next. You know, I don't like that. I think people should be involved in the music that they love. And I think that, you know, the big problem, I think, with music is that when people think they're bigger than the music, man, nobody's bigger than the music. And that's the most important thing about it. If you don't like something, just don't talk about it. And hail the good news about stuff you love. You know, but so many people want to get in the press or on television or on radio and knock stuff they don't like.
Yeah.
Just talk about the stuff that you love. You know what I'm saying? And that's what music has always been. You know, Bob Dylan, I love his records. I'll always buy his records. I'm always excited that he's made a record because of what he's given me and given the world. You know, and there's other groups I feel the same way about. So what if he made a couple of records that weren't like, you know, Blonde on Blonde? The fact is, he made Blonde on Blonde. You know, they can't all be Blonde on Blonde. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's silly to, like, for a rock critic to sit there and write about how Dylan's new record is not this or not that, because it doesn't matter, because he'd already given us this.
You did that Political World video with Dylan. When Dylan asked you to do a video with him, what was your initial feeling? I mean, this is Bob Dylan calling up
I just laughed.
Johnny Mellencamp.
Yeah, I just laughed. You know, it was funny for me, and it was a good experience.
I don't want you to betray confidences. That wouldn't be right. But to the extent that you feel comfortable, what's it like to spend a day with Bob Dylan? Because those who are puzzled by him, those who fervently admire him, they all say, where is this cat coming from, right?
Well, I think that's just it. Where is he coming from? You know, he's coming from the same place we all are. He wrestles with how he feels, how he looks. You know, at least that's what I could get from him. You know, he's afraid. He's not afraid. He's everything. You know, he's all of the emotions, and unlike you or me or people we may know, he's not afraid to hide those things. But his emotions are very small. You know, anger appears very small. I mean, he could get mad and flail his arms. But he was a very meek guy, you know, who put on maybe a different face when he was a kid. But as an adult, I admire the guy greatly. You know, I wouldn't want to be Bob Dylan. It's a hard job.
By the way, it's Christmas night, so that means that New Year's is a week away, and I am now making a New Year's resolution. I am never going to utter a sentence like, where is this cat coming from in 1992? Where that came from, where is this guy coming from is what I meant to say, and I throw myself on the mercy of the court. Don't hold it against me if I promise that I'll never do it again, okay?
Well, now, what is that? Do you think that dates you, this cat?
No, you know, I think it was
see, I tell you what,
like a pseudo-hip thing that, like, Sammy Davis might have said or something. I don't know.
I think it just kind of, I'm right with you. It didn't bother me a bit.
Well, okay. Now, he let me off the hook. That was nice. Talking about making videos, you make some very interesting videos, but like you said before, the videos and the way things are presented now almost lead the audience in the direction of what to think.
Right.
There's less of an involvement in imagination than in 1966 when we flipped on the radio.
Right.
How do you get around that? How do you deal with it?
You know, at first videos are very exciting for everybody. You know what I'm saying? You know, you start making a record and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, we got to make this video. And what the hell are we going to do with it? Where are you going to show it? So I started making videos for Europe, you know, because I didn't go over there. So they had this. So you know, in the beginning it was a lot of fun because you would tell these crazy little stories, you know. It was like, oh, they gave you this money to go out and mess around with film. And for me it was like, oh, this is nice. But now I don't, you know, to me, all I can do is really is a performance piece. Because I don't want to steer somebody's thinking any way other than, okay, there's John Mellencamp singing his song. You know, I can't write a song and then have like this big, long cinematic piece with it that has nothing to do with the song like you see so much of.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's very disruptive and ruins the song. So videos for me have about boiled down to, where's the camera? Give me a guitar. Where's the band? Let's go play the song.
I guess around the time of Scarecrow, it became very clear, although you'd done some things with social issues in the lyrics before that. Scarecrow is where it's very clear. That's kind of a line of demarcation.
Right.
It's interesting to me that the Reagan campaign wanted to use pink houses at one point, didn't they?
Well, that's what we heard, you know. I mean, we had some lower officials from Los Angeles call us up, and they were running this campaign and thought that they might want to use the song. And we kind of thought maybe that wasn't such a good idea, that they should go back and listen to the song. We had a grandfather for president during the 80s who was interested in upping the ante for big business, which he did. And, you know, corporate America doesn't really care about the normal person. You know what I'm saying? They don't, I don't feel that I don't mean individuals, but I mean the corporate America. Corporate America has ruined the small family farm. Corporate farming is very important now. And they don't really care so much if they use pesticide, as much as maybe if you and I were farmers. And we had, you know, the old family plot right there. You know, to them, you know, it's maximum yield. Let's get, you know, before you can borrow money from the government, if you're a farmer, you've got to say, well, I'm going to use this type of pesticide, and it's high. And, you know, a bushel of corn today is the same as it was 20 years ago.
Do you find that people look to you, maybe, I'm sure in a way that's inspiring, but maybe in a way sometimes it makes you uncomfortable? They look to you for answers, or they look to you as the only guy they can talk to because you try to express some of these concerns and you do it because of your gift in a dramatic way?
Well, I think I got a big mouth, you know. They might look to me for that. When we were doing Farm Aid, I had a lot of people talk to me about that. But I don't know, you know, because really the truth of the matter is I'm not a very political person at all. I mean, I have a hard time remembering which one's the donkey and which one's the you know, the elephant. I don't know, you know, who are these guys? So I'm not really politically minded, but I do know when I don't feel right about things. And I'm not afraid to say, this is incorrect behavior, you know.
In authority song,
right.
You know, it's one thing just to thumb your nose at authority.
Right.
It's another thing to offer, at the same time, some kind of vision of what it is you think is worthwhile. And I think that, in the video, accomplishes both those things. I mean, here you are going into the ring, and on the other side of the ring, there's a businessman, and there's some blonde who's on somebody's arm, and there's a bunch of people that are kind of arrayed as the things that a normal guy has to fight against. And he's going to lose.
Right.
I fight authority, and authority wins every time.
Yeah.
But what he's got behind him are the faces of all these normal people that he kind of represents. And then at the end, there's this little kid who sort of looks like you, and it's like I'm doomed. But rather than be in that corner with those guys, I'll roll up my sleeves and go back in there again.
Every time.
Let me backtrack before we wrap up this first show and ask you one thing from the early days. I read where you've kind of distanced yourself from Jack and Diane, which was a #1 hit. Might have been your biggest single of all the ones that have connected for you. But it was early on, and maybe it wasn't, you know, a fully mature work for you.
Right.
You still feel the same way? Or would you get up there on stage and bang out Jack and Diane and feel good about it?
Yeah, I'm going to do it. I mean, I'm going to play the song, but old songs are songs that, you know, when you write them, you never know what they mean as you're writing them. At least I don't. I don't sit down and think, okay, I'm going to write this song about Jack and Diane. That wasn't the case. Particularly back then, songs were very much surprises to me. And they're like old girlfriends. Sometimes the memory is wonderful, and sometimes it's like, I wish I'd have never done that.
And that's also from the era when the critics were beating you up, and you couldn't really establish and break away from Johnny Cougar just yet, right?
Yeah. So, but, you know, the thing about that is that, you know, there were a lot of, you know, cheap shots taken at John Mellencamp, I think. But at the same time, you know, there were some critics, some rock critics, who said very important things to me in their reviews. And they were intelligent reviews, and they definitely had a point of view. To see stuff like that was invaluable to me. I would, you know, would read that bad review 3 or 4 times because the guy was making a point. Legitimate, valid truth. But, you know, then there's these other guys who's got a big stereo and $30 and a pen. You just say to hell with that stuff. But there are writers back then who I am now friends with because they were, you know, they were saying something to me. And I really appreciate it.
I don't know how you feel, but I think you should take yourself seriously and never resort to cheap slapstick.
Well, you know, this Santa Claus thing, I think it's going to work out for me.
Yeah, I think, you know, every now and then you got to goose your image somehow.
That's right.
And I think you've done it here.
And this will really up it, too.
Will you come back tomorrow night? Especially if tomorrow night means wearing the same clothes and just doing this right now?
Only if I get to wear this hat.
You'll have to tune in on December 26th to find out. Until then, see you later and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thanks for watching Cleveland Live Music. It's awfully bright out here. I'd click on another one of my videos. Quit looking into the sun. Your mother told you not to do that. Please hit the subscribe button. And if you want to support the channel more, there's GoFundMe and Patreon information in the video descriptions. Ooh, ooh!